Hello, everyone. Dr. Mad here. Let's get mad about A Christmas Carol. So, we are reading through Stave 1 and we left off here. So, let's carry on. What else can I be? Returned the uncle, when I live in such a world of fools as this. Merry Christmas. Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer, a time for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozen of months presented dead against you. So obviously Dickens is just using lots of exclamations and rhetorical questions to show that Scrooge hates Christmas. And for him, it's the end of the year, you have to pay your bills, you have to balance your books. So a dozen months, 12 months in a year, and you just find yourself a year older, 1 year older, obviously, but no richer. Okay. If I could work my will, said Scrooge indignantly, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should. So indignant means annoyed or angry. And this is a reference to Christmas pudding. So he's saying that people who say Merry Christmas should be put into the pudding and boiled along with it. And of course, holly we use to decorate Christmas. Yeah. So these are all just ways of showing, Dickens showing that Scrooge hates Christmas. Uncle, pleaded the nephew. Nephew, returned the uncle sternly, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine. So stern means strongly, firmly, and he's saying, look, you celebrate Christmas the way you want to, and I will celebrate it, and let me celebrate it the way I want to. Keep it, repeated Scrooge's nephew, but you don't keep it. So he's saying, but you don't keep Christmas, you don't celebrate it. Leave me, let me leave it alone then, said Scrooge. Much good may it do you, much good it has ever done you. So Scrooge says, well, just leave me alone then and let me leave Christmas alone. It's never done you any good. There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say, returned the nephew. So derive means to get, and he's saying, but there are many good things which don't necessarily involve money, Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come round, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be, apart from that, as a good time. This is a long sentence, so let's just break it down a little bit. So he's saying that he's always thought of Christmas as a good time, and in addition to the fact that it should be respected, so veneration means to respect, and sacred means holy. So obviously Christmas, Jesus Christ, and Christianity. So holy meant to be a holy time. The only as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. So listing again, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. So he's using a metaphor to say that this is the time of year when people are good with each other and recognizing that we're all on this one planet and we're all going to die at the end. We're not different races. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, God bless it. So he's saying, even though Christmas has never given him any money, he still thinks it's a good thing, a good time of year. The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. So remember, we still have the clerk in the other room. The tank is just a metaphor that his room is really, really small. And without meaning to, he cheers. Applaud means to cheer. But then he realizes that it's inappropriate because obviously Scrooge is his boss. He pokes the fire and basically puts it out. Extinguish means to put out. Let me hear another sound from you, said Scrooge, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir, he added, turning to his nephew. I wonder you don't go into Parliament. So Scrooge says to the clerk, if you do that again, you'll lose your job. And then he turns to his nephew again and says, oh, you should go to Parliament. You're such a good speaker. He's being sarcastic. Don't be angry, uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow. Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression and said that he would see him in that extremity first. Now, this sentence is confusing. What he's saying is, what Scrooge says to him is, I'll see you in hell first. Okay, but Dickens doesn't want to spell it out. And I mean, that's quite a strange thing to say, isn't it, to anybody, let alone your nephew? But anyway, but why? Cried Scrooge's nephew. Why? Why did you get married? Said Scrooge. Because I fell in love. Because you fell in love, growled Scrooge, as if that were the only thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. Good afternoon. Let's just go back here. Now, this line seems a bit confusing, change of subject, but maybe Scrooge is suggesting that the reason he doesn't come to his house is because he doesn't like his wife or something, or he just doesn't like the fact that he got married. Because you fell in love, growled Scrooge, as if that were the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. Good afternoon. Nay, uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now? So this kind of confirms what I said earlier. Good afternoon, said Scrooge. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends? Good afternoon, said Scrooge. I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. So resolute means determined. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party. So he's saying we've never argued, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humour to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle. So what he's saying here is that he's come to Scrooge's office, and he knew that he's going to be a trial. He knew it was going to be difficult, but he's done it out of respect for Christmas, and he's going to keep his good humour despite his uncle's rudeness. Good afternoon, said Scrooge, and a happy new year, says the nephew. Good afternoon, said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding. So, notwithstanding means even so, despite his uncle's rudeness, he doesn't say an angry word back. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. So, bestow means to give. So, he says Merry Christmas to the clerk as well on the way out. And here, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge means that physically he was colder. He's not colder in terms of his personality. Okay, so he's warmer than Scrooge in his personality. And cordially means respectful, cheerful. There's another fellow, muttered Scrooge, who overheard him. My clerk with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam. Now, here we can start to see why Scrooge asked the question about marriage. So basically, saying that if you get married and you have a wife and family to look after, it's going to make you poorer, isn't it? You have to spend money on them. And in fact, it's a bit even a bit more complex than that. It's kind of foreshadowing. We're going to find out later on that Scrooge was engaged, but that his fiancee left him when he became obsessed with money, with business and money and so on. Okay. And then I'll retire to Bedlam is interesting. So Bedlam means chaos and confusion, but it's also a reference to a hospital for the mentally insane, for the medically insane. And in fact, because such hospitals can be chaotic, or back in those days they could be. That's where the meaning of the word also comes from. Actually, the original, and it's named after the town where one of the first, if not possibly the first, hos- hospital for the insane was situated. Actually, it's pronounced Bethlehem in those days, but the pronunciation changed over time, maybe to avoid confusion with Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. So lunatic obviously means mad. Nowadays we use this as a little bit of a swear word, but technically it just means somebody's mad. So as Scrooge goes out, two men come in. Portly means a little bit fat. To behold means to look at. So they're pleasant to look at, and they've got books and papers, and they bow to him. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? So he's saying, am I speaking to Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years, Scrooge replied. He died 7 years ago, this very night. So these lines are important because it gives us a sense of timing, of setting. So we now know that the story begins 7 years after Marley's death and that he died on Christmas Eve. We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner, said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. So the gentlemen are being sarcastic here because liberality means to be generous, but we know that Marley, or we're going to find out that Marley was very similar to Scrooge, actually. He was very stingy. It certainly was, for there had been two kindred spirits. So, yeah, this shows that Scrooge and Marley were very similar. At the ominous word liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head and handed the credentials back. So, credentials means your papers. So, ominous means something that hints of the future, something bad is going to happen in the future. So, he can sense that the men are going to ask him for charity. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. So the men say that at Christmas time, it's a good thing to give some charity to the poor and destitute. So destitute is just another word for poor. It means extremely poor. You literally have nothing and not even the basics. Are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the union workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are, still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor then, said Scrooge. So here, obviously, rhetorical questions suggesting Scrooge is saying that they can go to prison if they want to. And the workhouses, so remember from the overview and context video, poor people could go to workhouses in return for food and shelter and so on, but they were supposed to work in return, and people hated the workhouses. Sounds like a good deal, but the poor people didn't like them. And you can see here that many people were against the workhouses. The treadmill and the poor law are so yeah. So the poor law we talked about the 1834 poor law in the context video, and this reference to the treadmill. You can see why people didn't like these places because basically they would literally stand on a treadmill and they'd have to work, and the treadmill would then do the work, maybe grinding wheat to whatever. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid, from what you said at first, that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, returned the gentleman, a few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time, all others, when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? So here they're saying that the workhouses are not really very happy places for most people, and that they're raising money for the poor, obviously. And they're saying that at Christmas time is when poor people really feel their poverty because they can see rich people enjoying themselves. Yeah, here. What shall I put you down for? In other words, how much shall I write down that you're going to give? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous, so this is a bit of humor here. So anonymous means not giving your name. I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. So what he's saying here is that he doesn't even celebrate Christmas himself. So why should he give money for other people to celebrate it? And these establishments, he's talking about the prisons and the workhouses, implying that he gives money to them. Now, it's highly unlikely that he gives money to them. He's probably referring to the taxes that he would have to pay, which would then be used for these prisons and workhouses. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. So you can see they're saying that a lot of people would rather die before going to the workhouses. If they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that. Now, this reference to surplus population is to Thomas Malthus, the economist, which we discussed in the context video, so I won't go into that here. And then he's saying, besides, I'm not sure I agree with what you've just said, or I don't know it's true that what you've just said. But you might know it, observed the gentleman. So he's implying that Scrooge doesn't know because he doesn't wish to know. He doesn't care about the poor. It's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. So that paragraph is fairly straightforward. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. So pursue means to chase after, withdrew means to go back out. Scrooge resumed his labours with an improved opinion of himself and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. So resume means to start again. Facetious is like jolly, a bit more happy. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with flaring links, preferring their services to go before horses in carriages and conduct them on their way. So flaring links are basically torches back in those days, but not like modern torches, not with batteries. They were chemical torches. You can look that up yourself if you want to. Prefer means to offer. So, in other words, these people would go in front of the carriages to show the way when it was very foggy and dark. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. So this sentence is quite long and complicated. So ancient means old, gruff means rough, peeping slyly down. So slyly means cunning. But obviously, what's happening here is personification, the church, and is sort of implying that Scrooge is feeling guilty that the church or God or whatever does not approve of his behavior and his attitude towards the poor. So Gothic means dark and gloomy, but it's comes from the architecture of those kind of churches and castles and buildings that you see in horror movies, Frankenstein, and so on. And in other words, it was so dark and foggy that you couldn't see the top of the church tower, so that when it rung the bell every quarter of an hour and on the hour, tremulous means shaking or trembling, vibrations, as if his teeth were chattering in his frozen head up there. So this whole sentence is using personification to describe it, but also this idea of the church frowning upon Scrooge. The cold became intense. In the main street, at the corner of the court, some labourers were repairing the gas pipes and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered. So brazier is like a metal container where you can make a fire, warming their hands. So these would have been probably homeless people, and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. So the heat is making them happy, even though they're obviously miserable otherwise. The water plug being left in solitude, its overflowing suddenly congealed and turned to misanthropic ice. So water plug is like a fire hydrant. Those things, those red things where you can plug in a pipe for water, so it's used by the fire brigade. You don't see them much here in the UK, more in America. And again, lots of personification being used here. So the water, so congeal means to freeze. The water is frozen. And misanthropic means somebody who hates people. So again, here, even though the author is describing the surroundings, you can see it's kind of talking about Scrooge, really, because we know that Scrooge is misanthropic. He hates people. The brightness of the shops where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows made pale faces ruddy as they passed. So the brightness of the shops makes the people red, faces red. Poulterers' and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sell had anything to do. So this sentence here is quite confusing. So poultry means where they sell chickens, and obviously grocers. Basically, this whole sentence is implying that it was so cold that nobody came out shopping, even if people had the money to buy these things in the first place. The Lord Mayor, in the stronghold of the mighty mansion house, gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Christmas as a Lord Mayor's household should, and even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and the baby sallied out to buy the beef. So here, Dickens is comparing the rich people with 50 cooks and butlers with the poor people who can't really afford anything. But even so, here, the tailor, somebody who makes clothes and fixes clothes, and he's been fined for being drunk and fighting in the streets, actually, and garret means attic, so they live in this small attic. But even so, this bit here is possibly suggesting the opposite of what I said earlier, that because it's Christmas, even the poor people would try to make some kind of an effort to have a party. Foggier yet and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold. So piercing means stabbing, sharp. If the good Saint Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would have roared to lusty purpose. So this reference here to Saint Dunstan, he used to fight with the devil, and he would nip. So the evil spirit is the devil, and he would nip the devil's nose with tongs. So tongs are like those metal instruments that you pick things up with. And he's saying that instead of using the tongs, if he had just given the devil this cold weather, then the devil would have roared with good reason. So, in other words, the devil, when he was nipped at with the tongs, he would have roared, right? But Dickens is saying, he's just using humor, saying that if the saint had used the weather instead, it would have made the devil roar even louder. The owner of one scant young nose, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold, as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," and then this next bit here is just saying a little boy who was extremely cold, so it kind of makes you wonder why he's out, and it's probably because he's begging. And so he's going to sing Scrooge a carol to get some money from him. But Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. So remember that here Scrooge is still in his office, okay? Dickens was describing the weather outside, but Scrooge is still in his office. So he picks up the ruler and he's going to obviously attack the little boy with it. So the singer runs, the boy runs, okay? At length the hour of shutting up the counting-house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat. So here it's closing time. Scrooge gets up, so dismount means to get up from, and tacitly means without saying it directly. So by getting up, he's kind of suggesting to the clerk that it's closing time, who obviously gets up straight away and puts on his hat. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll stop there for this video. So we're about halfway through chapter 1 or stave 1. So I'll see you in the next video. And in the meantime, if you found this video useful, please don't forget to subscribe and to tell all your friends about it.